Welcome back to the Oklahoma Drill. It has been a long time. I think last episode I promised that we wouldn't do this, and then we did it. We just went like 6 months without recording. It's fine because this is like the most important thing that has happened since the last time we recorded. It's like Brent Venables got hired, and then the Thunder got the number 2 pick. So this is the Thunder got the number 2 pick episode, everybody.
Yeah, this is the podcast is largely turning into a things are big enough that we just want to talk about it with each other. And instead of us just like calling and having a Zoom chat or something about this, we decided to record it. Where essentially that's essentially what these have turned into. So,
Yes.
because yeah, I mean, this is huge. This is absolutely massive.
Yeah. I mean, technically, this is the highest draft pick the Thunder have ever had.
Right, right. And like the amount of which this could have gone poorly, it like cannot be overstated that that was a very, very real thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you went through this season and you get to watch Shea and Giddy, but then you watch the end of the year where they can't play anybody that has even any remote NBA talent because they wanted it for tonight,
Starting
and
Xavier Simpson and Georgios Kalaitzakis multiple games was about tonight.
right, right. They played, they got to where they were playing six guys over 40 minutes, at the end of the season. And it was about tonight. And that could have ended with us getting the 8 and 13 pick.
Yeah.
It legitimately could have. That was a legitimate option, or 7 and 12. All of these are terrible options, but in a lot of ways in this specific draft, I think 2 and 12 is kind of like the ideal spot because you don't have the pressure of being the number 1 pick.
Mm-hmm.
And you still, you get the second guy, and I think we'll talk about, I think there's a pretty clear top 3 in this draft and maybe even a top 2. I know Woj was talking about how his sense right now is that the consensus around the NBA is that there's a top 2.
That seems to be what every mock draft I've seen from beat writers who are important people. Like,
right.
It's Chet and Jabari at the top.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And just, being a part of that to where if that's truly the case, and let's just assume for a second that Sam Presti agrees with that. Which he very well might not, but that's a hard thing to even consider. But that it's kind of like that 2007 draft with Odin and Durant, where the Thunder fell into a position, or the Sonics at the time fell into a position where it was like, oh, you just take the other guy. It's not hard.
Which, speaking of, I think somebody needs to measure Chet's legs, make sure they're the same length.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, no, it's absolutely huge, and to get 12 too, because I think that there's kind of a tier, in the top 3, and there's probably like a 4 to 8, 4 to 10 tier. It might even go 4 to 12. Honestly, 4 to 12 seems pretty flat to me, but I do think that there's a drop off after that, and to kind of shouts to the Pelicans, for doing just enough to take out the Clippers and move that pick up 3 slots. The Thunder didn't have to do anything, so that's a big deal. And I think we'll talk here in a bit about what I hope happens with that 12th pick. But let's start with what the hell's going to happen at 2? Like, how do we feel? Like, obviously we're excited, but why are we excited, Ryan?
Well, so here's the thing is I think you, me, and Sam have talked about this. I think we still sort of believe there's a top 3. And that means that like Sam Presti is going to have his choice of 2 of the top 3, assuming Orlando doesn't do something insane, right? And I like all of those guys. Like every one of them, I think, is tangibly a great fit for the Thunder. I think they're great fits in maybe different ways, but each one of them, like you can see, like, oh, okay, Oklahoma City can take this guy, and could be the best player on the board, and he's a great fit in their situation.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And in our group chat message, like I know I've changed multiple times throughout this year. I started off as a Jabari Smith guy, then I went and I was a Chet Holmgren guy, and then I became a Paolo guy. Went back to Jabari, then back to Chet. Like it's changing frequently for me, so it just kind of shows like that there's three incredible options here for the Thunder, and um, who uh who would you prefer? Like if we don't know what the Magic are gonna do, but let's say they take Shaden Sharp just
Okay.
randomly, whatever,
Which like
and the Thunder.
I know we're joking about that, but that could happen. And they might even not be wrong to do it. But
Right, we have no idea.
um yeah,
He's so
we
mysterious,
can enter
but
the Shaden Sharp zone very quickly because
oh
he's a
yeah,
mystery and I kind of believe him. But
yeah,
so th- I would be so terrified first off if that happened because I like this is the sort of choice that is like I don't know if there's a bad option, but there probably is, and I can't see what it is.
right.
And so choosing one of those three guys is just like a terrifying prospect. I don't
Mhm.
even like necessarily envy Presti for having to make the choice between two of those guys. That said, I'm gonna go a little bit against the like accepted NBA grain at the moment and go, I think, with Paolo Banchero,
Mhm.
because I think physically he's NBA ready. Um, I believe in his shot creation ability, and I think it's funny because people are gonna this. I think the general consensus is that like Chet is the high ceiling guy in this, but I actually think there's a degree to which it's Paolo, because if Paolo hits on everything, like what is that player, right? Like if Paolo becomes a 3 level scorer and like an acceptable defender, of like an acceptable defender of wings, that's a superstar. Like, with not an incredible amount of comparisons in the NBA, honestly, like LeBron
Right.
James. Not that he
Yeah.
would be LeBron James, and I'm not saying he would be LeBron James, but like a player with that size who is like ability to create for himself and others is rare.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. And to me, I think it kind of comes down to what, okay, so Paolo to me is a guy that if you feel like the Thunder need a guy to be the best offensive player on the team still after looking at Shea and Josh Giddey, and you think those guys are good, but we need more punch, then Paolo is probably the right pick, because he can fit with those guys. I think he's gonna shoot okay, and the amount of skill in passing in those three guys is pretty phenomenally high. Where it goes with as it pertains to Chet and Jabari Smith, I think if you're a true believer in Shea and Giddey, those guys to me are a lot about making life easier on Shea and Giddey.
Yeah, I
Because
agree with
the
that.
things that they would bring are going to open up the world to a guy like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who has spent the last 2 years playing in some of the worst spaced offenses you'll ever see. I mean, they've like kind of actively played him with the worst collection of talent that they can come up with just because they're trying to lose games. And if you put a guy like Jabari Smith, who is a 6'10" wing four that can shoot 40% from three, he's going to open up everything for a guy like Shea. He's going to open up everything. He's going to cover up some of the defensive holes that Josh Giddey has. And if the same thing, I think the same thing kind of, applies to Chet because he's a guy that could shoot 38, 39, 40% from three at the center position, who can cover up mistakes that Josh Giddey, Shea might make on the perimeter by erasing shots at the rim, while also not being, completely hopeless in a like switch setting where he can still guard on the perimeter a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I completely agree with that. To me, it's the interesting thing about this draft is like, say, the way I've been thinking of it, it's like, say Orlando takes Jabari, and the choices between Chet and Paolo. To me, I think the most interesting aspect of that choice is what it says ultimately, like the future of like Giddey is, like what his role on the team will be. Because if you go at Chet, you're saying, okay, Josh Giddey is going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And it's going to be about creating, and it's going to be about creating advantageous situations for Shea to attack. It's going to be about hitting an open Chet Holmgren at the rim or behind the line. Whereas if you choose Paolo, now it's like Josh Giddey is like a connective piece who like the ball comes to, and in response to like the attacks of Paolo and Shea on the defense, right? And then it's about him redirecting the play into something else, where as opposed to being a primary initiator. At least I think this is the sort of thing I dream about now in all my dreams, because we got the number 2 pick and it's incredible.
No, of course. Yeah, and so to me, it comes down to what you value, and in a lot of ways, I think it comes down to how one might feel about Josh Giddey. I am kind of the belief that he's going to be a guy that can be a primary creator on a team. Which, if you think back to the last year,
such a 180 from you, not even a year ago from you,
right?
Like July 30th of last year, a complete 180 you've made on Josh Giddey.
100%, and I'll admit it. Like I was wrong. I truly believe it. Like if you watch the things that guy's able to do on a basketball court, I mean, he's a top 5 passer in the league as a rookie. And I think that there's enough, like he's not a non-shooter. He's a bad shooter, but he's not a non-shooter.
Right.
And I think guys like that are as skilled in other ways, a lot of times they find a way to become acceptable shooters. And I think Josh Giddey as an acceptable shooter is a primary creator option. Next to Shea, who I think we all know can be that as well. So in my eyes, I've kind of settled on the other side from where Ryan is, in that I want to make life easier on those two. And the guy that I think at this, it is 8:06 on May 18th, the day after the lottery.
Central Daylight
Time. Central Time.
Yeah. Or is it standard? Are we in standard or daylight? We're in daylight.
Oh, Central Daylight Time.
I have to think about this because I live in Arizona.
Right. So those, I want to make life easier on those two guys, but the guy I'm leaning to right now is Chet Holmgren. I've gone back and forth since yesterday.
This has literally changed since we started the podcast.
No. It's I was on Chet at the start of the pod. I promise. I was on Chet. To me, he's the guy that, you'll hear a lot of people talk about. He has the highest upside. And I think that's probably true. If you consider the defensive upside that he has, which I think he has legitimate all defense upside in that regard. He's a staggeringly good rim protector that is not hopeless on the perimeter. Like that's an elite level defensive player, possibly. He'll have to get stronger. I mean, if you look at Chet, it doesn't take a genius to understand, like, oh yeah, he's going to have to get bigger. But my thing with him is that I just kind of think he will. I think most guys do. They get into the NBA and they get stronger and bigger. That's a thing that happens, Yeah.
And I cannot stress this enough. Even though like currently I lean Paolo, I love the idea of Chet in Oklahoma City. And the thing about Chet that I just keep coming back to, that I would come back to, like even back during the college basketball season when we were bouncing back, and I know especially at the start of it, we started the season not sold on Chet, I think, at all. Is that fair? Like coming into this like draft scouting process, we were really, really skeptical about Chet. Right. But the thing that started winning me over is just he has been unbelievably efficient on both ends of the floor at every level of basketball he has ever played.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And um, he's like, I think a lot of people with the Thunder, they look at Chet and they think Poku,
No,
you
and
know?
that's completely
Um,
wrong.
he, they're nothing alike other than they are skinny white boys. Like
Yeah,
that is literally where the comparison ends. Um, because he's kind of a motherfucker on the basketball court,
right.
you know? Poku is, I think, definitively a soft player. Like he avoids contact. He doesn't play with any force, but he's skilled, so he's very intriguing.
Yeah,
Chet's very skilled, but he plays with force. I
yeah.
mean, that guy he will dunk on you and he will try to dunk on you. And that's just not something I've ever seen a guy like Poku do. And I'm not even sure he's capable of it.
There was that one time that one game against the Hornets where he tried to obliterate a guy. It was a charge.
Hmm.
And then he did throw it down on Time Lord that one time. I
Okay.
have like an encyclopedic knowledge of Poku plays, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but no, that's absolutely true. And I think like watching Chet has been really instructive about Poku because what you realize is like, okay, these are two similarly shaped guys, but Chet is a big. He plays center, and Poku
Yeah.
doesn't. Like Poku is a wing. He is an oversized wing, um, and Chet is like a skinny center. Like that's the difference.
Yeah. Now the Chet is much closer to Evan Mobley than he is to a guy like Poku.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, Chet and Mobley are not like for like players. Like they're very different, but there is some similarities. And you know, I think one of the things that like at this point, I'm just like 90% sure that Chet is going to be Presti's guy. Um, and maybe it's not a situation where we really know that, and I'm sure we won't know until the draft. But if I were guessing, Chet's got to be Presti's guy. I think that Woj came out and said that he felt like if the Thunder had the number one pick last year, they would have taken Evan Mobley over Cade Cunningham.
yeah,
You know, and to me, the same guy that looks at Evan Mobley as a number one pick, the same guy that looks at Kristaps Porzingis a year before he declares for the draft and promises him, the
mm-hmm.
same guy that's willing to draft a guy that looks like Poku from like a physical standpoint, that he's gonna look at Chet and love him.
Yeah.
And I just think that's where we're gonna wind up.
And then he's gonna say, "Damn it, why aren't you Victor Wembanyama?" But he'll take him
Well,
just the
sure.
same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely he will.
That's gonna be the heartbreaking thing next season is because I can't move on to next draft already before this one has even happened. But people are gonna like
No, please don't.
no. People are gonna like get into it about Wembanyama. And it's like you can't tank for one guy. Sorry. Like, and there will be other good prospects in that draft, but none of them are going to be Victor Wembanyama. And you can't tank for one guy.
Yeah, and well, yeah, that's absolutely true. And you definitely can't make a pick this year based on
exactly.
a guy in next year's
exactly.
draft. It's just not a thing that you can do.
No, it would be completely irresponsible. So,
right.
That was a silly diversion, but yeah, no, Chet is. I do think Chet is exactly what Presti is looking for. Now, the thing about that is that last year, the Orlando Magic drafted Chet's high school teammate, Jalen Suggs. I don't know if there's anything to read into that. Jalen Suggs was not good this year, so I don't think the Orlando Magic should be beholden to like his preferences.
Right. Yeah, if Jalen Suggs had like the year Franz Wagner had, then maybe you look at Suggs as as a big piece, and you're like, yeah, we gotta let's bring in this guy. But he was bad, honestly, as a rookie, and I don't think that means he's going to be a bad player in the NBA. I still think he's going to be pretty good, but he's not a guy that you even consider in this process, you know. And so, well, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Like, you have to also consider like the Magic have Jonathan Isaac, who I guess they're still going to have on their team for whatever reason.
Yeah,
And
he's alive, I guess.
he exists, and he's super into like QAnon stuff at this point. But
Yeah.
you know,
This is what Orlando does to a person.
but I guess so. But uh, I don't know. The consensus for whatever that means right now, the day after the lottery, I've seen many, many, many more mock drafts mock Jabari Smith to the Magic, which I think makes complete and total sense. You know, he fits fantastically with what they're building. He fits great with Franz Wagner at the 4, those at the 3 and the 4. Like, that's incredible, you know.
Yeah.
And that leaves, the Thunder, where I think Presti's going to want Chet. Because another thing that you have to consider with these guys is that Presti is and has always been about personality. You know,
Yeah.
he is very much a guy that, you know, you get a situation where it's Kevin Durant. I'm not saying Kevin Durant was like a bad personality or whatever, but if it's a guy like Kevin Durant, you're going to draft him no matter what, unless he's just like
Right.
the biggest piece of shit ever, which he is not. But that's a really important thing. And I think the way Chet plays, everything that you hear about the way Chet is as a person, like, it just screams Sam Presti guy to me. Like, that dude, like I said, he's kind of a motherfucker. And I know that, like, you know, Presti's big thing in his late season or his postseason thing was physicality. And people thought, oh, well, we can't take Chet if we want to be physical, but that's
No,
just not
Chet
true.
is physical. This is the thing people
He's a
don't
very
understand.
physical player. Yeah, he's a very physical player, and I think the team that we have, like, Josh Giddey's a great rebounder for his position, and
Yeah.
really just in general, he's a 6'9" guy. He can rebound.
Yeah.
Shea's a great rebounder for his position. Dort can rebound. Like, that might be a concern, but those guys can pick up the slack a little bit for a guy like Chet if he's struggling with physicality in his early years in the NBA. Like, I'm not concerned about that aspect. To me, I look at the idea of, we have two guys in Giddey and Shea that I think are good enough to be, you know, primary creators on a team. Maybe not a championship team, but you work with what you have. And having a center that could shoot 40% from 3, like, the advantages that's going to create for your spacing is just, you really can't even place a value on that. It's so high.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw this. J. Kyle Mann wrote a thing about Chet for the Ringer that was published yesterday, and there was a comparison that he was terrified to make, and like, even speaking out loud feels like a jinx. And I don't even know who is being jinxed here. But contained within this piece were the words Pau Gasol.
Okay.
Which would just be, I mean, if that's what Chet ends up being, that's amazing.
Yeah.
If he's not, then that's also fine. But like,
right. Well, I definitely think it would certainly be a modern version of Pau Gasol, because Pau Gasol in his day was like a back to the basket post guy that was fantastic.
Right.
But if Pau Gasol were coming up today, that dude's shooting threes. You know, he ended his career shooting threes, but he's coming up today. He's shooting threes, and he's living as like a high post creator, which Chet has every ability to be that. So I don't hate that.
Right.
I think that defensively, I mean, again, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I was I watched Pau Gasol when he came to the Lakers, and I would guess Chet is ahead of where Pau Gasol was defensively at this stage in their careers.
Yeah.
I don't know I'm not entirely sure. I can't, just being honest, but I don't hate that. To me, like, maybe some of that. I think there's a little bit of Kristaps Porzingis there. Porzingis just never turned into what people thought he could be.
Well, we'll get into my concerns with Chet. That it's like, what happened to Porzingis is that he got hurt a lot. Right. I think that has limited him more than anything. He's just been injured, and the result of that is he wasn't able to become I think, what he could have been had he stayed healthy all that time. Now, there's some other things with Kristaps. I do think, there's a, I think there was a criticism floating around him, especially late in his Mavs tenure, that he kind of just played like a shooting guard.
Yeah.
Which is, limiting what you can be if you're 7'3" and you just stand on the perimeter and wait for the ball to come to you.
Yeah. Well, and the thing there's a couple things with Porzingis. There was the injuries, obviously, that caused they were an issue, but the man started his career with the New York Knicks. That's not good for anybody.
Correct.
Literally nobody is going to not nobody, but the difficulty of reaching your potential as a rookie starting out with the New York Knicks is really, really difficult. And so that didn't help. And then he got traded to play with Luka, and that just the two didn't mesh very well. To me, Chet starting his career in Oklahoma City, where he's going to have the ability to work through a bunch of things that young players have to work through without New York criticism. That's huge. He's going to be playing for a franchise that genuinely cares about development of every player on the roster, which is definitely not the case in the Knicks in New York. And he's just a different personality, man. Porzingis, even when Porzingis was coming into the league, everybody knew that that dude felt like he was a superstar. And that can work for a lot of guys, and it does work for a lot of guys. But I don't get that sense from Chet. I think Chet is a guy that he knows he can be that, but he also is he kind of knows he hasn't done anything yet, and he has to get to that point. So I have a lot more, health aside. I have no idea. As far as I know, Chet's been healthy throughout his career, which is a good sign. Absolutely, you don't want a guy that looks like that's had multiple knee injuries or something, foot injuries especially, up until this point. So if he can stay healthy, I'm pretty excited, giddy, if you will, about what the possibilities of Chet Holmgren on this team could be.
Yeah. I think here's a relevant paragraph from the J. Kyle Mann piece, with regards to projecting what Chet will be. And I think this gets into the fact that statistically, like I said, he's just been unbelievably efficient when anytime he has played basketball at any level. This piece goes, when I ran projections for what I thought his stat profile could be and compared them with what players 6'11" or taller have done in the past, 35-ish% shooter from three, a little over a block and 2 or 3 assists per game. Good, but not outrageous offensive numbers. Names came back that startled me and almost compelled me to throw my laptop into some holy water for fear of being struck by lightning. He goes on to say, even after softening the parameters a bit to 6'10" or taller, 30% from three, 1 block, 2 assists, there are no shoddy players that fit that description. And I think that's a relative, Chet averaged 4 blocks a game in college.
Yeah.
Playing mostly power forward.
Yeah. Which he would certainly have to play power forward, especially early in his career at times. He's not going to be a full-time center when he gets in the league. It's just not going to happen.
But it's just you think about, and this is, to me, when I talk about he's been absurdly efficient. He's been absurdly efficient playing a lot of different kinds of basketball. First off, in high school, where he was, Chet Holmgren, but in high school. And he shot 80% at the rim. Or 80% overall, I think. I think his field goal percentage his senior year in high school was 80%. And then he goes to Gonzaga and is kind of a supporting character in the Drew Timme show, which is just not a role he is going to be playing in the NBA. But in that, you saw him just be absurdly efficient. Just when he got an opportunity to score, he took it and succeeded. And similarly, just flattened teams on the other end at the rim.
Right. Well, and Chet, to me, is a guy that if he goes to the Magic, for example, I would have some concerns about that because they don't have the creation ability that the Thunder have in
Yeah,
Shea and
this
Giddey.
is true.
That to me is really what makes this pick for me is
Right.
that we have two high level creators on the team that are going to make his life easier and he's going to be able to make their life easier as well. Um, but if he's a guy that you're dumping the ball down to, all right, go make something up, it's not going to go very well. It wouldn't have gone very well for Evan Mobley this year if that's what they had asked him to do.
Yeah.
But he had Darius Garland setting him up. Like he had Jarrett Allen that he was playing next to. Like he was playing next to some really talented players. And I think Chet Holmgren would have that luxury in Oklahoma City. And it would make things go really smooth. One more thing I'll say with Chet is part of my draft analysis. Not to say that I am good at this because I don't think I am, but whenever the right people tend to dislike a player, I think I generally go against those people and kind of come to my conclusion in that way. And in this case, every idiot that I see on Twitter, people that are notoriously stupid when it comes to evaluating basketball, evaluating sports in general, they don't like Chet. And to me, that screams like, okay, these people are always wrong. They're probably going to be wrong about this guy too. You know, that makes me like Chet even more. And so that I can honestly say that is definitely part of this as well for me. Is that like, man, there's a bunch of idiots that think he's going to suck, so he's probably going to be pretty good.
I like that, and I think your point about the Magic is pretty correct. I think the Thunder, or even I don't know about the Rockets. Well, he would be fine with the Rockets, but I don't know what their timeline is. I don't know what they expect their pick to ultimately be. Right. Yeah. I mean, my concern with the Rockets is like, it feels like they have a lot of issues becoming a coherent offense.
Yeah. They're weird. Like to me, just Paolo screams Houston Rocket to me. Like I see him in Houston. It makes too much sense to me. Just in the same way that Chet seems like a Thunder guy, Paolo seems like a Rocket to me.
Yeah.
And Jabari seems like a Magic guy to me, honestly. Like I think these are the fits that make sense in my brain. And if I were going to pair guys with teams, that's how it would go in that top three. But obviously the Magic could blow this whole thing up and I think Paolo makes a lot of sense in Orlando because they don't have a primary creator. And I think Paolo has the best chance of being that kind of guy out of all these players. Mm-hmm. To me, with Paolo, like in some ways, I feel like he has the highest ceiling. In other ways, I feel like he doesn't. It's very strange. Like I think it's safe to say he has the highest offensive ceiling of the whole group. Like you said, he's this huge body that has creation, passing, all of those abilities.
But the goal for him on defense is to just be a passable defender. Whereas like Jabari and Chet, we're talking about guys who, if they pan out defensively, are like first team guys.
Exactly. Yeah, like a median outcome for both of those guys is a plus defender. Like there's no doubt. So let's talk a little bit about Jabari. And because we've talked obviously a lot more about the other two, but what are your thoughts with Jabari Smith?
I guess so. My feelings about Jabari Smith is that I would like him to be on my basketball team for sure. He doesn't make me as excited as Chet or Paolo just because it's almost too straightforward in terms of like, he's going to be like a big wing who shoots well and plays great defense, and that's going to make your team just immeasurably better in an extremely straightforward way. I think the interesting things about Chet and Paolo are how they change the Thunder. I think Jabari just sort of makes the Thunder better. It's just like, imagine if Darius Bazley was like really good. And there you go.
Yeah, I mean, that's The Thunder were like I think the worst 3-point shooting team in the league this year, and Jabari Smith's a 42% 3-point shooter. And it's not like he was just taking a bunch of open catch and shoot threes. Like that dude was taking difficult threes and he was
Mhm.
making a high percentage of them. Um, the biggest thing with Jabari is like, you know, here's my concern with him. And the concern maybe of if the Thunder were to pass on taking him if they had that
Mhm.
opportunity. Like some guys like him get into the league and they develop. He's super young. He's super young. I think
Yes,
he's younger than the other two.
he is.
And if he were to develop a better handle and an ability to get to the rim better, then you're starting to think, oh, instead of just being like a borderline all star type, you're looking at a possible superstar at that point.
Yeah,
But the deal is like he has to develop that to unlock that aspect of his game because otherwise you're looking at a guy who's going to be dependent on Shea and Giddy to get him good looks, or he's going to be taking step back ISO fadeaways. That's
Mhm.
pretty much the extent of his ability right now, which is it's a great skill to have. It would help the Thunder immensely, but like you said, it's not changing the Thunder. It's
Right.
just making them better. Um, so yeah, I like Jabari a lot, and to me, I have him behind Chet because it's super easy. Like it's just like, oh, this makes sense. It won't fail. Jabari's not going to fail in the NBA. I feel one.
Mhm.
I feel 98% confident that he's going to be a really good NBA player. And
Basically, the
there's a
only thing that could happen, the only way Jabari fails is if his handle never improves and he ends up on a team that just asks him to create a lot of offense himself.
right, but
And then he just becomes like
J-
an inefficient jump shooter guy. But still,
right,
like,
but Jabari Smith on the Oklahoma City Thunder isn't going to fail in that way because they're
mhm.
not going to ask him to do that. So that to me is why I really like him for the Thunder because it's like you're guaranteeing that you're getting a guy that's going to start for you for the next 8 years.
Yeah. I guess another way of
Like
putting it is that like the failed version of Jabari Smith is kind of like what Jason Tatum's haters think he is,
yeah, I guess so.
which is still,
To me,
still actually a very good basketball player.
right? Yeah, yeah. To me, like I I like them both, man. Because like I said, it really comes down to how I feel about Gideon and Shea, and I think that those two are good enough for me to want to make life easier on them. So that's why I look at guys like Chet and Jabari over a guy like Paolo who would just add more creation ability to a team that already has, I think, a lot of it,
Mhm.
or enough. You can't have too much, but I think that there's enough for them to be able to build a successful offense that would operate well in the playoffs, even.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of where I'm at. One of the things too with Chet that I know you said we aren't gonna consider the next draft, but to me with Chet, like there's a very real chance that he's not even remotely a helpful player next year because
That's true.
he's just not physically. A lot of times, guys like that aren't very strong, they don't shoot very well early in their career,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if
This was
he's
even
not shooting
something.
well, then
Oh, sorry.
yeah, go
But
ahead.
like this is even something you saw with Giddy this season. You know,
Yeah,
the NBA season is very long. Like there's not another basketball league that I mean, guys in Europe who are playing in two league who are playing like in a domestic and the Euro League probably come close, but there's not
right.
another league that plays 82 games.
No,
And so like that absolutely wears on young players, especially young players lacking in strength, who are having to put a lot into getting the ball to the rim.
right. Well, because also, I mean, the threes are literally further away,
Yeah.
you know, and he's taken more of a physical beating down low than he ever has before because he's playing bigger guys. So to me, there's a very real chance that Chet could come in and shoot like 32% from three and be just like actively not helpful to the offense as a rookie. And that to me is not a bad result because if you can get another pretty good lottery pick next year, like
Mhm.
I think that's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're going to get Victor Wembanyama, but if you can add the fifth or sixth pick in next year's draft, which at this point people seem to think is better than this year's draft.
Yeah.
Obviously, that always changes, but if it is better than this year's draft, you're getting a good player, or you're at least getting a guy that projects to fit in with your core group. And having another guy like that is it could be the difference in being a contender and not being a contender, you know?
Yeah. So the other thing about this pick is I don't know. How do you think who the Thunder end up taking it to informs what they do with 12?
Well, I honestly don't think that it does. Um, to me, it's just you take the best player available
Mhm.
at 12. Personally, I would be totally down to try to trade up into,
Yeah.
because I think that trading up from 12 is is going to be extremely reasonable this year. Like some years it's not, but I think this year is one of those years
Right.
because
And
it's
the other thing about trading up is, I mean, I know we literally just talked about how, maybe Chet isn't helpful immediately, but like we this is the pick. This was the point of tanking, we
yeah,
might get another one, but we probably won't. Um,
yeah.
and so it's like now is the time to start turning potential assets into value.
Yeah, and if you feel like there's another guy, like maybe Sam Presti sees a guy that he can get at 7 that he thinks is another blue chip prospect,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to Chet. If maybe it's a Shaden Sharp, maybe it's an AJ Griffin, maybe that's what he sees there. And if you can go get that guy, then you have to do it. Um, and maybe he sees that guy at 12 too. I don't know, but can I tell you the guy that I want the Thunder to
Yeah.
get? I want Jeremy Sohan.
Yeah.
I all in, all in on Jeremy Sohan. Especially, I mean, especially with a guy like Chet or Jabari, because you're adding shooting at that position. Like Sohan's not a good shooter right now. I don't think he's a hopeless shooter prospect. I think he can improve, but like that guy, there's just so much defensive ability. There's so much IQ there.
Yeah.
I don't see how that guy fails in the NBA. I
Yeah.
really don't.
Jeremy Sohan, I think in our Twitter chant earlier, you were like, is he just like Scotty Barnes without the insane athletic upside?
Yeah,
That might be true. That might be it.
I mean, he's got that kind of like he's 6'9", 230 pounds. Not a freakish athlete, but he's a really good lateral athlete. Like he
Mm-hmm.
moves his feet and stays in front of everybody essentially. And he's super long. Like he's got long arms, maybe not Scotty Barnes length, but he's still really long. And I kind of see him as the guy that is going to be able to play the 5 um, in the NBA, especially in the playoffs in situations like that. And if
Yeah.
you're putting a guy like him next to Chet,
That's,
I get really excited. I
yeah.
get really, really excited about that possibility because Chet could give you that shooting that Sohan maybe doesn't give you,
Mm-hmm.
and then Sohan could be kind of the center offensively while being this insanely switchable um, lockdown type defender on defense that you really need next to guys like Josh Giddey and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yeah.
Like the Thunder have to find guys that can kind of cover up some of those deficiencies, and I think Sohan is the guy that covers up the deficiencies of Chet and of Shea
Yeah.
and Josh Giddey.
Sohan,
And like
Chet,
I
and Lou is like, you're talking about an incredible defensive core at that point.
absolutely, because you think about it, lose your point of attack guy, like he's an elite point of attack defender.
Mm-hmm.
Chet's your back line, your weak side rim protection. Sohan's the guy that switches and can do anything
Right.
off the ball. He can
And at
also
that point,
protect the rim.
yeah. And at that point, you're just like asking Shea and Giddy to not fall asleep and be big, which they are.
Yeah, like Josh Giddey's 6'9". He can be a good defensive player. And I honestly think that he will become a pretty good defensive player. I think the Thunder emphasize defense too much for him not to
Yeah.
at least be serviceable in that regard. And I think the more good players you put around Shea, the better he's going to defend.
Yeah,
Like,
I
I really
absolutely
believe
agree.
that.
I think we saw that his first season, his rookie season, which was by far his best
Yeah,
defensive season.
right. He was in a position where he had to defend and it was important, and he did. He's not incapable of it. It's just like right now, he's the only guy that can get a shot off for the Thunder. So yeah, he relaxes on defense. I don't blame him. That's fine. So that to me is like, you're working with something interesting at that point. If you get a guy like Sohan and Chet Holmgren, but even if you draft Jabari Smith, I think Sohan's great because then that could be your like 3-4 combination. And then if you want to go small, then Jabari and Sohan can be your 4-5. Like that's totally workable.
Yeah.
Like I don't see any issues there. Next to Paolo, it's not as good of a fit, but I don't think that it would be a reason to not pick Sohan.
Right.
I still like him. I still like him enough to want him over basically anybody else, and that could be in that range. And if you have to trade up to 7, 8, 9, go get him.
Yeah.
Go get that guy.
I think that's true. Here's the thing about Paolo. I do agree the fit isn't quite as incredible because Paolo doesn't bring the shooting that either Jabari or Chet necessarily brings yet. He could absolutely develop it. But at that point, you're just fielding such an intelligent basketball team that I think it would end up working.
Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things we didn't mention. Like, I think Chet brings IQ as well. I don't think he lacks in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. Especially defensively.
I think Jabari's the least high IQ player offensively out of the whole group. He's just not a great passer. He tends to stop the ball. He tends to get the ball and think. And that might not be the most ideal fit for what the Thunder have seemingly kind of wanted to build from like they want every guy to get the ball and they're either driving or they're passing it immediately. That's kind of seemingly the goal of what they're doing. So maybe Jabari doesn't fit that ideally, but I think Chet does. I think he's a guy you get him, you put him out there behind the 3-point line and he's going to make quick decisions with the ball. And one of the things I keep thinking about is we don't have Luka. Luka's incredible, but what the Mavericks have built is like they play 5 out all the time, and things are just wide open for guys to drive. And Jalen Brunson looks like a freaking all-star because there's driving lanes everywhere. Spencer Dinwiddie is able to have great games because he can drive.
Yeah.
Because you essentially just have to beat one man, and then it's like the defense is rotating from the 3-point line. That's a lot of space they have to cover, and then you just hit an open shooter at that point.
Yeah.
So I think a guy like Chet or Jabari really opened that door pretty significantly.
Yeah. Another great thing about Jeremy Sohan is his his background is super interesting to me.
Yeah.
He was born in
Guyman. Like the Polish national team. Yeah, he was born in Guyman, Oklahoma. It's incredible.
Born in Guyman, grew up in England, is Polish American.
Yep.
I love
Plays for the Polish national team. It's amazing. Yeah, no, that's my guy. Like I really liked Scotty Barnes last year, and there was that point where we thought he was going to have to be the guy that we took at 6, and he wound up moving up to 4, and we all saw how that worked out.
Yeah,
and he's pretty freaking. I'm not saying he's going to be that good, but if you can get a guy that's 75% of that, you're looking pretty good. Like you take that, I believe. Are there any other guys at 12 that you're kind of in on at this point, or that you might want him to trade up for?
In terms of trading up, I mean, there's going to be so many questions surrounding Shaedon Sharpe.
Yeah.
If he's available and you can trade up for Shaedon Sharpe, I think you do that instantly. But a lot of that is going to depend on how people feel about him after he goes through private workouts, because he just didn't play basketball this year. That's something we've seen with with Baisley, that's not something Presti is too worried about if he thinks he's got the right guy.
Right.
And there are people who talk about Shaden Sharp as in if he had put film out playing basketball for Kentucky, we would be talking about him as a potential number 1 pick.
Right.
So that's cool. I feel like he's kind of I also want to say this because I feel like people are not going to quite understand what I mean by it, but there's a Josh Primo aspect to this is a value pick in terms this is a value pick in terms of he it's almost like you're getting him a year early.
Right.
And had he waited, maybe he would be number 1 next year. He wouldn't have been because Victor Wembanyama's in the draft, but he would have been a guy in the top 2 or 3 next year. So that's one guy. I don't love the idea of trading up for Jalen Duren, but he's a guy who, if he falls, I would be totally okay with that. And the one other guy I find interesting in this sort of range, who you probably wouldn't have to even trade up for, is Ousmane Dieng, who I think a lot of people gave up on at the start of the NBL season and are now checking back in and discovering that he actually had a pretty good second half of his season, which is not too dissimilar to Josh Giddey. He's kind of in some ways he's similar to Sohan. He's not the defensive player Sohan is, but he is an intelligent defender, I think, who is, I think a lot of people think of him as a high upside pick. He's another very young player, 6'9", 7-foot wingspan, who legitimately played in sort of a guard role in the NBL at that size. Again, very similar to Josh Giddey. I think he's the sort of guy you pick if you say look, there's no limit on the degree to which oversized playmaking helps a team, and he can maybe shoot it. He's getting there. I like his form more than I like his numbers. I'll say that. Don't look at his numbers; they're not good.
Right. Yeah, I'll just kind of jump in with my Shaden Sharp thoughts, because I think he's easily the most interesting guy because we just don't know what he is. To me, it all comes down to personality and interviewing. If you feel like he has the mentality, because if you're coming to the Thunder, I don't think that you can just be I'm going to be option A. Guy like you don't want to throw a guy with the personality of a Jalen Green in with Josh Giddey and Shea, because those guys are already established. And so if Shaden Sharp isn't going to fit in personality wise with those guys, then it concerns me, because he might be talented enough, but you might just not ever get a fully bought in version of him. If his personality checks out and he's I just want to fit in and come play, go draft him. Absolutely go draft him, because he has number 1 overall upside. I don't think there's any doubt, because he's a guy that could be a 20 point per game scorer. I could see that pretty easily. And then, earlier we were talking about, you have with Paolo, you're adding more playmaking, scoring to a team that already has those guys, or you can draft guys that can help. And if you could do both of those things, I think that's pretty much the home run of the situation. And if Shaden Sharp can essentially replace what Lou Dort is in the starting lineup, and then you're talking, okay, you're cooking, because you've got Shea as your 1, Sharp as your 2, Giddey's your 3. Find some person to play the 4. I don't care. And then Chet at the 5. That's some ridiculous talent if it works.
Yeah. The one thing about this is Where it would get really weird is Paolo and then taking on Shaden Sharp. Like that becomes very strange because at that point I don't like the other. But the thing about that is like I also kind of like how weird that is. It gets positionally very nebulous for a guy like Giddey because that's the before we had two and we were thinking of thinking realistically, right, preparing ourselves to draft in the 4-5-6. The thing about drafting Shaden Sharp that I liked was that you just say, oh, okay, like Josh Giddey will become a 4, and that will be his role on the team is he will play power forward, which is what he's sized for and what he'll ultimately grow into, I think.
Yeah.
But now, like, you're looking at drafting Chet and just saying, like, yeah, we're going to be a giant team made of monster people. And so that's one thing about the Shaden Sharp pick is it becomes interesting. And I guess you sort of already have that with Lou in the starting lineup, right? And so I do think like slotting in Sharp, if like, and I agree with you about fit, like mentality of fit. That would be really important there because there's already, and I don't think this is a big deal, but there was already like some discussion during the season, like really just before Josh got shut down for the season of like, how does Shea feel about the idea of Josh being like the primary ball handler on the team? And he was like, well, and I think the quote was something like, well, this wasn't plan A or something like that.
Right.
And it's like, I get, because there's a degree to which I think Shea has expressed that he feels like he's a number one primary ball handler guy.
Yeah. Well,
but at the same time,
here's something.
He's been on successful teams where he's been with other like definitive primary ball handlers. So I'm not worried about that. But
yeah, let me throw something out.
Yeah, hit me.
You draft Shaden Sharp, and he is what you think he is in terms of creation ability. And it's taking too much away from Shea, and he's not happy about it. You know what you do?
You're going to say it, and people are going to get upset.
You just trade Shea. It's not hard. That's what you do. If you have a guy in Shaden Sharp that is already good enough to like take some of that role away from Shea to the extent where he's upset about it, then you get rid of the guy that's upset and older. It's not hard because Shaden Sharp also has a higher defensive upside than Shea. Like, then you just go with like Shaden Sharp, Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, Chet. It's not hard, but I'm not worried about that.
I'm not worried about that either.
That's where I'm at.
It's funny that you bring that up though, because God, if you said that on the Thunder Reddit, people lose their goddamn minds. People are already. So Kevin O'Connor did his like talk through podcast of his big board post lottery, and he offhandedly mentions trading Shea, and I just know like people are gonna like Thunder fans are gonna go nuts in the comments about that. But yeah, no, I definitely like. I think that's a totally valid point. Is like if Shaden Sharp is good enough that he's taking touches away from Shea, and like to the point that Shea is upset about it, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, you got younger, your upside's better. If you trade Shea, like you're gonna get a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna get a lot for it. It's gonna be great, So that's where I stand on that. Like to me, I like Shea. I don't want to trade him, which in a lot of ways is a departure from how I've felt before. So he's definitely grown on me, and I like him a lot. But yeah, I mean, if there's some issues and he's not happy with Giddey or Shaden Sharp, then just he doesn't have to be here. It's fine, But anyways, like that's my Shaden Sharp. You talked about Jalen Duren. I don't want to draft a center that high. I don't even care.
Yeah, I feel that absolutely.
I mean, I guess Chet is a center, but he's not really a center.
It's not the same.
Yeah,
that's like getting mad about that would be getting mad about drafting Evan Mobley last year.
Right, exactly. And Jalen Duren is like the traditional pick and roll 5 that I don't value it. I like Jalen Duren. I think he's gonna be a good player. I don't want to draft him. I don't want to draft Mark Williams. I don't want to draft Walker Kessler at any point. I would rather have a team that's weird and like playing Jeremy Sohan at the 5, like primarily like that. I would much prefer a team like that than have a guy like Jalen Duren trying to play next to Chet. Like he's going to clog up the paint. It's just that's not what Shea and Josh Giddey need, in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
And then I'm intrigued by Usman Jang. I really am. I Part of me would think that 12 is a reach for him, but probably not.
It's a weird range. I don't know exactly, like, because I don't know. Maybe the other thing you can do with 12 is that if you don't like what's left of the tier you're in, you can trade back.
Right.
Which is also like, it's also possible. Maybe Jeremy Sohan is like, he flies up people's boards. A guy like Dyson Daniels flies up people's boards.
Yeah.
And you're left with like Benny Mathurin, who I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, he's fine. I mean, I don't really want him on the Thunder, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather have AJ Griffin than him. Because I've been thinking about, like, what if the Thunder on draft night wound up with Jabari Smith and AJ Griffin? Like, then your shooting problems are just like solved.
Yeah.
You know, like that'd be kind of wild to have like a team that's like, oh, you have like 2+ shooters at the 3 and the 4. Like that'd be pretty sweet. So that's been kind of something on my mind. And AJ Griffin is a guy that I would rate him over a guy like Usman Jang. Like I would trade up for AJ Griffin. I think he'd be worth giving up assets to go up and get him. Here's a trade idea I've been throwing around in my brain, and it's with Portland at 7.
There's been a lot of talk about Portland at 7, so let's hear it.
Yeah, and I don't know what is available to Portland, to trade for at 7, but I've heard a lot of talk about they want to trade for Jeremy Grant, which if Jeremy Grant's going to solve your problems, then that's probably not a great thing. It kind of reminds me of when teams were bringing in Jeff Green to solve all of their wing scoring problems. That's going to be a losing battle. But
the Damian Lillard Jeremy Grant pairing has like second round ceiling, just like stamped on it already. But
oh yeah, no doubt about it. But the thing with me, so I'm not trading 7 for Jeremy Grant. There's no way in hell. That's a stupid trade.
Yeah.
But I might trade 12 for Jeremy Grant. And so my question for you is, would you be willing to trade 12 Lou Dort and let's say maybe maybe 34 for 7, in which then the Blazers would have Lou Dort, who I think would fit great next to Damian Lillard. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And then they could trade 12 for Jeremy Grant. And so then Portland is adding 2 like high level role players that defend on a team that desperately needs that.
Yeah.
What would you say about that? Are you not willing to give up Dort for just moving up 5 spots, or what would you say? If it was, let's say, to move up, I'm not going to say to move up to get Shaedon Sharpe, but if you're moving up to get Jeremy Sohan.
I think it depends a lot on who you're moving up to get. And I don't know. I don't know if I would trade Dort in that situation for Sohan.
Yeah.
I mean, Lou Dort it's tricky, and it's also difficult to evaluating this is interesting because the other aspect of Lou Dort is I don't know how much this should play into it and how much this will play into the Thunder. Maybe more, maybe less than people think it would, but he's like legitimately Shea's best friend. I think having Lou Dort on the team is part of keeping Shea happy. And it's not like he's a bad player that you're doing that for, right? He's an incredible point of attack defender. And a guy who is an inconsistent, but like not unbelievably compromised 3-point shooter. So I don't know if I would do it for Sohan. I might do it for Shaedon Sharpe.
Yeah, I would do it for Shaden Sharp. Yeah.
I would definitely, if Shaden Sharp fell to 7 and that was on the table, I would do it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Shay can have a new Canadian best friend.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I, yeah, I think that's where I fall. I think, I do think like Lou is just like, he's a good proven commodity at this point. And especially if we'd be giving up another pick in this, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and again, I'm talking like a second. I've heard
Right.
people say like, oh, Lou, and then another future first. I'm like, nah,
No.
it's too much. Just to move up 5. I might do it for Shaden Sharp, but yeah, for Sohan, I like him a lot, but I'm not doing that for him. Um, yeah, that's just one of those trades that I just think it's easy. It makes sense to me. Like if Portland, I mean Portland, I don't think is going to want to take a guy at 7 because
Yeah.
they want to be good next year. They have Damian Lillard on their basketball team, and you're not getting a guy at 7 that's going to help. Um, and so, yeah, if you could trade those guys and get, then you're coming into next year with Lou Dort and Jeremy Grant filling out major holes on your roster. I think that's a solid team that's probably making the playoffs, or it's in the play-in range
Mm-hmm.
for sure. So yeah,
Would
what do
you
you think?
take, if you're the Blazers, would you take that trade, but it's Trey Mann instead of Lou Dort?
I wouldn't if I were Portland. I would want specifically Lou Dort because of the defense. They already
Mm-hmm.
have Anthony Simons,
That's true.
um, who is, uh, kind of similar to Trey Mann. And the thing with Trey Mann is that he largely sucks. Um, I like him. I like him, and I think that he has potential. Like there's something there, but dude, his numbers are just putrid. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's a bad NBA player at this point, and if Portland's trading that pick, they need guys that are going to help them this year. You know, what if it required throwing in Kenrich instead of a future first or a second even?
So
It's
this would be
throwing in
Lou Dort,
34.
Kenrich, and 12 for 7.
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
absolutely not.
No.
Okay,
I
I'm
mean,
just curious.
like, I think Kenrich is like a late first value. I think Lou is probably around like a late lottery value. I think that's too
Yeah,
much to move up 5 spots.
yeah, especially in a fairly flat area where the guy at 12 and 7 is probably not
Right.
extremely different. But so yeah, I think Shaden Sharp's not going to be there at 7. So
Yeah, I
I
think
think I think you'd have
I
to
think
trade
if
up
Shaden Sharp
higher.
is the kind of player we think he hope is going, like if he's the kind of player worth making this trade for, he won't be there at 7.
Right. But yeah, I mean, so I mean, he's extremely interesting. Um, can I just throw in a couple of this is for other teams, like
Yeah.
just fits for guys that I just think are just too perfect?
Yeah. Can I start?
Yeah,
The
please.
Pacers
I
are
know what you're
drafting
gonna say.
Keegan Murray.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The only way it doesn't happen is if he's already gone, which ESPN has him going to the Kings at 4, which I think is
That would be
wild.
wild.
Yeah, I would like it because one of my favorite fits is Jaden Ivey in Detroit.
Ooh, that would be
Um,
fun. Like
yeah,
a more direct attack next to Cade.
exactly. Because Cade is like your primary creator, but he's also 6'8", so you can put whoever you want next to him.
Mm-hmm.
And they need athleticism and a guy that can put pressure on the rim because that's not really what Cade can do.
Yeah.
I think it's I think it's an incredible fit. I would love to see Jaden Ivey in Detroit with Cade. I already mentioned that I want to see Powell. I think Powell in Houston is perfect. Um, Another one, like you said, Keegan Murray is a pacer. Like even if he doesn't play for the Pacer, he's still a pacer
Yeah.
and will
It will
always be a
happen.
pacer. It'll happen at some point. They'll trade for him. Um, let's see who else in my mind. Portland, there's nobody. Um, Honestly, maybe that's it. Where, like, assuming the Thunder don't get Shaden Sharp, where do you want him to wind up? I just am dreading the idea. Like, I just hope the Kings don't take him because I want him to have a chance.
Yeah, this is
And
the
I
thing.
if
So this is the thing about this draft range. Um, is we say we don't think Shaden Sharp would fall to 7, but all that has to happen for that to happen is for the Kings to like Jalen Duren, and then it
yeah,
will happen.
yeah.
Um,
And it doesn't even really have to be Jalen Duren. I mean, they could
right. Dyson
I mean,
Daniels.
they could like Keegan Murray, and then Detroit would like. I think Detroit would draft Jaden Ivey if he's available, and then if Indiana they might really like AJ Griffin or something.
Right.
Like, oh, he's a guy that's going to slide in and shoot for us immediately. Like, they're always looking for immediate help. So I could see that being the case. So it's not impossible. Like, definitely not that Shaden Sharp could be there at 7.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a shame. I don't know where a good landing spot is for him other than I would kind of like him on the Pistons. I think
yeah,
that gives them a different flavor than going with Ivy, but it's kind of similar. Um,
yeah, agreed.
uh, but I also agree that the Pistons would probably take Ivy in that situation. And leaving that, like, I don't love him on the Pacers. Though
Yeah,
actually, I
I
say
don't either.
that Tyrese Halliburton, Shaden Sharp could be a fun backcourt. I just don't like the Pacers.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah, I just don't want the Pacers to have a guy like that, to be honest. Um,
Um,
who was the most obvious Spur in this group of
Ooh, that's an
guys?
interesting question. Um,
I think it might be Jeremy Sohan. He seems like a Spur to me.
yeah, yeah.
He really does.
Hmm.
I could see them taking him. I could also see the Spurs liking Jalen Duren, and because they've kind of gotten into drafting super young, high upside guys, and
Yeah,
they might think he's
yeah.
that kind of guy.
In like 5 years, the Josh Primo, Jalen Duren pick and roll pairing is going to be very good.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be really interesting. But
um,
uh, to me, Ochai Abaji just screams Charlotte Hornet to me
yeah.
because
Hmm.
they always just want guys that are going to come in and play immediately, even though it's stupid. Um, that just
Hmm.
screams Charlotte Hornet, and
Yeah,
they're probably going to draft Mark Williams. If they don't draft Mark Williams, I'll be thoroughly convinced that it's because he went to Duke, and not because of what he is as a basketball player. It'll just be
yeah,
because Jordan won't draft a Duke guy.
yeah. I I went up and down, and I'm now very down on this player. But the Nuggets are taking Jovic at 21.
Oh, and they have to. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to have Jokic and Jovic together.
Hmm.
Like, it has to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely has to happen. Yeah. Any thoughts on any guys at 30 that you have some interest in?
Ooh. Uh, it's hard to say. For the
It
longest
is.
time, I was like, 30, we'll just pencil in. We'll just sneak in and grab Yannick Nzosa. But Yannick Nzosa is a bad basketball player, and he should not be drafted. I thought he was
Yep.
going to be good, and then he wasn't. He's very bad. I say that. He's like, I think people still like his defense, but I watch
Hmm.
like maybe like 15 minutes of just literally just every possession of him in a game, and he just
Hmm.
can't put the basketball through that neat little hole.
Yeah, they've got him at 56 on ESPN, so he's fallen. He's fallen
Yeah,
fast.
I just can't do that, which is an important thing. And it's funny because it's in these clips, it was almost, he has a really good sense of space as a role man. It's impressive to watch, but it's like harmful for his team because then he gets the ball.
Yeah, that
And he
doesn't
just like
sound
I
enticing
just
at all.
can't, like, would kind of looks like he would embarrass himself in a layup line. Uh,
Man, I did not expect this to just be this. What is his name again?
Yannick
Inzosa?
Nzosa, which NBA
Yannick
Draft Room
Inzosa.
still
He's
calls
catching
him
strays.
the number 3 international prospect in the world right now. On
Wow.
which is, I find very odd because Jovic is ahead of him, and I like at this point. Maybe I don't understand what an international prospect is. Is Ousmane Dieng not an international prospect? Maybe they just haven't updated this.
I think that's probably what it is.
Okay.
Let me throw out a couple names. I really like Jalen Williams from Santa Clara. He's like a 6'6" guard that has like a 7'2" wingspan. He
Sure.
shot 51%, 40% from three, 80% from the free throw line. He averaged 4 assists a game at Santa Clara. Like that guy just screams good basketball player to me. I don't think he's overly athletic, but if he were, he would be a lottery pick. So that's why he's down there. But so that's a guy that I really like as a late first round pick. And then, man, Pat Baldwin is still like,
that is a poisoned chalice of a man.
Like, he's still kind of interesting, right? Like,
he
was supposed to be a top 10 pick.
He can't jump 2 feet in the air.
Yeah, but like, if he's 6'9" and can shoot, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Can he shoot? I
think he can shoot. I mean, he obviously didn't shoot this year, but he was such a good shooter projected out of high school. Like
I will say this: if we draft PBJ at 30, it means that in workouts he impressed, and in that case, I would be
exactly.
Fine with it, I think, because no one is touching him right now if he doesn't massively blow them away in workouts.
Yeah, I think he might be worth like a swing. You know, if he's a 6'9" guy that can shoot, the Thunder could use that. There's no doubt about that.
How would you feel about a big guy at 30?
Yeah, I don't draft big guys
at all.
No,
not at 30. What about at 34?
No, those guys. Like, to me, I'd be willing to, like, you're drafting big guys early if they're like legit, but the further you go down, like they never turn out to be anything,
Yeah.
Like,
I see
draft
what you
wings.
mean by that. Yeah.
Draft wings. You might find a guy that you're like, oh shit, Grant Williams, you're playing him in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like you might stumble into something like that, later. To me, later in the draft, the more wing heavy I go. I might like consider like backup point guard or something later in the draft because I still kind of think we need one of those. But I don't really think there's anybody in this draft that really screams point guard in that range, especially.
Yeah. I guess my other prediction here is I don't think we draft at 30 and 34.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a situation, there's a guy at 26 we want to get up. I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. At the very least, like I don't even know what he's going to do, but like these are picks that Sam moves around on, like almost reflexively. Like last year when he moved up for JRE, that was still what a weird thing. Who did he have to jump to get him?
I think it was Dallas, I think.
Okay.
There was a lot of weird stuff because I remember last year, like Memphis made a trade into the late first round or maybe very, very early second to get Santi Aldama because they thought the Thunder were going to take him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were like, the Thunder are going to take that guy.
You would have. I think you were in Texas at the time, but I think you would have walked to the Paycom Center for an explanation.
Hey man, I may have said some regretful things after last draft. I might need to be a little more level-headed, a little more trusting, because I mean every guy they drafted, they showed some stuff that it's like, oh, they were probably the right pick, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Like even JRE, who I hated at the time, Trey Mann, like they all showed some stuff in their rookie years that make me think, okay, there's something. And then obviously I think Giddey might be my favorite player on the team at this point. So I just probably need to sit down and shut up when it comes to this stuff. Just feel like, oh, Sam Presti drafted this guy. Cool. Great. Sounds great. That might be my analysis this year. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Oh, he drafted Jalen Duren. Oh, he traded up to 6 to draft Jalen Duren. Awesome. Looks great. We're coming out with Paolo Banchero and Jalen Duren. Awesome. Yep.
Hey,
that's what I would have done.
I mean, listen. Imagine if I told you that was what we were doing in 2021.
Oh,
You would have assumed that we had picked number 1 and 2 and drafted Jalen Duren with 1.
Right. No, I would have been hyped up, man. It would have been awesome. Okay, real quick. Have you seen I mean, speaking of Jalen Duren, did you see how bad Amani Bates was this year?
Um,
Like,
I didn't watch, but I know
but
that
just
he
his
is
numbers.
not good.
No, he's bad. Like actively harmful. He wound up transferring. I don't even know where he wound up. Um, but I mean, he averaged 9.7 points a game. He shot 38% from the field, 32% from three, 64% from the free throw line. Like this guy was supposed to be, he was billed as the next Kevin Durant like 2 years ago.
I
And
mean, it was
he's
just
not an
it's
NBA player.
unfortunate because he's just a guy who was by the way, it looks like maybe Louisville for Amani
Okay.
Bates. So not
I'm
going
sure
far.
that'll fix everything for him.
Yeah. But no, it really does. It seems like Amani Bates is sort of the like a prototypical warning of like, hey, just because a guy got tall early.
Well, right. And he was ahead of the game from a skill standpoint.
Right.
Like 15, 16-year-olds are not supposed to be as skilled as he was. But what people don't consider is that like some guys just don't get better from that point, and
Yeah.
everybody else catches up to him, and then he's like, oh, he just looks like a normal player. So yeah, no, that's just one of those things where it's like, man, you can't plan ahead, 2 or 3 years in advance. You
Mhm.
have to see how it shakes out because like Jalen Durham was supposed to be like the number 2 pick in the 2023 draft behind Amani Bates. Like that was what it was supposed to be. We didn't even know who Victor Wembanyama was whenever
Yeah.
Imani Bates was like
And
this
look, by the
next
time we
KD
get to
figure.
2023, Victor Wembanyama is going to be 7'8", and he's going to have to medically retire.
It's true.
Um,
Yeah, because I think he's like he's 7'4" now.
I don't even know if that's true anymore. I saw a
I
picture
don't
today of
either.
him next to a guy listed at 7'5" and
And
shoulders
he was
above him.
like, yeah, yeah, it's insane. But we'll just see how that turns out. But anything else you want to say? I think we've talked for a long time, so as is tradition.
I don't really know what else to say. I do think we've been pretty thorough, to our credit,
Yeah.
obviously. Other than just the fact that like I will not be sad on draft night. I do not think there will be a result that will upset me. Because even if something unexpected happens, I feel like I trust Sam at this point.
Right. And I was thinking about this. Even if Sam like just goes off the reservation and drafts Shaden Sharp at 2, that'll almost be like super exciting because it's like, oh, he knows something that we don't about this guy.
Right.
And
it would be sort of a confirmation of like, because like in like December, everyone's like, hey, this draft kind of stinks. Like, it was I think there was I don't know how you feel about resident Josh Giddey stan Ben Pfeiffer. But he's very low on Jabari. And I remember like he was like, if you have the number 1 pick and you're thinking about drafting Jabari Smith, maybe trade back. It's like if that's how people feel about this draft, and a guy like Shaden Sharp, who's a complete unknown, gets drafted by Sam Presti at 2, you're like, oh, well, we learned something then.
Yeah. I like Ben Pfeiffer just because he was right about Josh Giddey.
Right.
That's really
I do think he gets his takes get pretty extravagant.
Yes, they do.
Like he was really big about Roko Prkanic, or that isn't Prkacin. Roko Prkacin.
Yeah.
He was a huge Roko Prkacin head. Roko Prkacin is not even in this draft.
Oh, I had totally forgotten about that guy. Is he just not good enough to play?
He was injured all year. He'll be in the 2023 draft probably. But at that point he'll be like 22. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I remember him being really high on the little guard from Auburn. And I was just like, you can't draft. I forgot his name. Sharif Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Sharif Cooper, and I was like, nah, that guy, there's no way. Can't.
I-
And he went like mid-second round. So
yeah,
like the NBA agreed.
yeah.
But yeah.
The hell happened to Sharif Cooper? He's on the Hawks and he's doing
He
too
played
much
G
stuff with
League
the
like all
Hawks.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Cool. Anything else?
I think that about covers it. We got in some Sharif Cooper hate at the end there. Good for us. The that's about it. What draft is June 23rd?
Yep. Also my birthday, so that'll be fun.
You'll get a good present from Presty. That'll be great.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this special edition of the Oklahoma Drill. Subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, etc. Follow us on Twitter at RWMaxi and at Perd_Hapley. And we'll see you later, maybe before the draft, but we're not making any promises. We're not a podcast that makes promises anymore. We also, I guess we should talk about OU football at some point. The spring game did happen. That was not enlightening, but it was a spring game. It was cool. How many people were there?
A lot of people showed up. That was the highlight. That was cool.
Yeah. We'll talk about that at some point, surely. But that's going to wrap it up for us. Thanks for listening.